I had the pleasure this summer of spending a little bit of time up north. As you know, I'm married to a Yooper girl, a Yooper woman. She's from the Upper Peninsula, so we have the opportunity to get up north once or twice a summer and to take advantage of God's creation up there. But also, I love whenever I go up because it really gives me an opportunity to learn some real Yooper wisdom. The story is told of some archaeologists out on the East Coast in New York. And they were digging down, and they dug down about 150 feet. And there they found a little bit of copper wire. So sure enough, they called over the local newspaper, and they proclaimed in the newspaper that, we New Yorkers are among the early inventors of the entire telephone network. Not to be outdone, some archaeologists in California, they dug down 200 feet. And there they too found a little bit of copper wire. And so sure enough, they called over the local newspaper and they proclaimed to the newspaper, here in California, 200 years ago, we had the earliest makings of a digital network. Not to be outdone, an amateur archaeologist in the Upper Peninsula, a man from Escanaba, dug down 300 feet. And what did he find 300 feet below? Absolutely nothing. He called over the local newspaper and he proclaimed to the newspaper, 300 years ago, our ancestors had already gone wireless. Yes, you can learn some real wisdom when you travel in the Upper Peninsula. A true story, as Rabbi Groner would say, a true story that actually happened. I was at a video store in the Upper Peninsula. Do you remember those? Remember video stores? You had to pay to get movies and stuff? Well, it's the UP. What do you want from me? So sure enough, Rebecca and I were up north, and we picked out a few movies to rent, and we brought them to the counter, and the total came to $6.03. So I reached into my pocket, and I gave the young man behind the counter a $10 bill. He looked at it, and he said to me, "Sir," I hate when they say that. He said to me, "Sir, don't you have 3 pennies?" I said, "No, all I have is this 10. He says, "You mean you go out of the house without 3 pennies in your wallet?" "Yeah." He says, "Well, my mother always taught me you should never leave home without 3 pennies in your pocket." Well, I was on vacation. I took the bait. Why? Why should you never leave home without 3 pennies in your pocket? Because you never know when you're going to have to give someone your 2 cents and you want something left over. True story. It feels like in this last year, we've spent a lot of time giving each other our 2 cents. It feels like in the last year, everybody has been giving everybody else their 2 cents. It's been an angry year. We're angry. You hear it in the way people talk to each other. You hear it in the way people exchange with each other at the cash register on the street. You hear it with the way politicians talk to the media and media talk to the politicians. We're angry. We're angry. Now, why are we angry? Maybe we here are angry because clearly anti-Semitism is on the rise. Did you know between 2015 and 2016, there were 300 more acts of anti-Semitism here in the United States? And then in 2017, we're already on course to pass that number as well. Anti-Semitism is clearly on the rise, and we're angry about it. Maybe we're angry because there are simply so many people around us. I read something interesting. Did you know in the year 1500, there were about 500 million people in the world? 500 years ago, there were about 500 million people in the world. Today, there are about 7 billion people in the world. The United States population alone has tripled in the last century. No wonder we're so angry. We're constantly surrounded by people. We're angry because of traffic. We're angry because of cell phones. We're angry because of the way people drive while on cell phones. We're angry because people don't have the strength to even take 24 hours, a Sabbath, away from their technology, to turn off a cell phone and a computer. We're angry because it's constantly going off. That technology is constantly around us. We're surrounded by it. Even Mother Nature is angry. Of course, the hurricanes in Texas and Florida, 2 earthquakes in Mexico. It feels like even nature is angry against us. We're angry today. Angry. Now, some of that anger is appropriate. Some of it is righteous indignation. We are truly angry at the way things are happening in this world. Because after all, our friends and our neighbors continue to elect misogynists, people who denigrate women and do so publicly. We're angry because we're electing leaders who foment fear, try to make us afraid of everything. Did you know that there were more suicides in the last year than there were terrorist deaths? Yet we spend a lot more time worrying about the terrorists than we do about those with mental illness. Did you know there were twice as many traffic deaths? And we worry a lot more time about the terrorists. But we're electing leaders who foment fear. We're electing leaders who are but 1 or 2 degrees away from Louis Farrakhan and his anti-Semitism. We're electing leaders who use anti-Zionism as a cover for anti-Semitism. No wonder we're angry. If you're on the left, you should be angry about what's happening on the right. And if you're on the right, you should be angry about what's happening on the left. We should be angry today. We are angry. But I'm sure you, like me, have been watching this righteous indignation spill over into unrighteous indignation. You know, I was driving down the street with my kids in the back of the car. And there on a pickup truck next to us was a bumper sticker. And now my kids can read now. And what did the bumper sticker say? If they come for your guns, give them your bullets first. That's not righteous indignation. That's unrighteous indignation. And of course, we all saw what happened in Charlottesville. We're angry about it. Neo-Nazis, white supremacists, they're on the rise and they're marching. And this group that stands up to them, the Antifa, I don't know if I'm saying it right. It's a new word to me, like the alt-right. It just sort of came out of nowhere. How do they respond to this horror that is white supremacy? How do they respond to it? They throw bodily fluids at them. That's not righteous indignation. That is unrighteous indignation. Not only is it gross and disgusting, but it also gives an opportunity for the less educated among us, for the less discerning among us, or even for the anti-Semitic and the racist among us, to create a moral equivalency between the white supremacy movement and those of us who stand up against them. Shame on them. Shame on them, and shame on those who talked about the moral equivalency. We should be angry in the world today. We should be angry, and in our indignation, we should be righteous about it, but not unrighteous about it. And too often, each of you and me, we're all seeing that line being crossed. Now, what is the difference between righteous and unrighteous indignation? And how do we know when to stand up and yell about that which is wrong in this world, and when to just stand by and let our leaders lead because maybe they know something we don't know? We read in our Torah portion this morning, several hours ago, I'm sure all of you remember. We read in our Torah portion this morning about the birth of Isaac. On Rosh Hashanah, we celebrate the faith of Avram Avinu and of Sarah Imenu. We celebrate the faith and the strength of Abraham and Sarah. Just on the other side of that Torah portion is Akedat Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac, about which we'll read tomorrow, and Abraham's faith. And just before our Torah portion this morning, in the book of Genesis, we come across the story of Sodom and Amorah, of Sodom and Gomorrah. God comes down to Abraham and says to Abraham, I'm going to destroy these two cities. And Avram says to God, you, the righteous judge, how could you wipe out the innocent with the wicked? And God says to Abraham, okay, you find 50 people who are righteous in the city and I won't wipe them out. And Avram's got chutzpah. He says to God, what about only 40? God says, okay, you find 40. Avram says, okay, how about 30? Avram talks God all the way down to 10, and God says, okay, Avram, if there are 10 righteous people in this world, I will not destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. Sure enough, God couldn't find the 10 righteous people in Sodom and Amorah, so God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. But here we have Abraham as a man of justice, as a man of strength, standing up even to God himself to say, this is wrong. And in his righteous indignation, he stood up to our Creator on high. But just after that, we have what we'll read tomorrow morning with Akedat Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac. And God says to Avram, take the son, your only son, the one that you love, the one that you've been waiting for a century, and offer him up as a sacrifice on Mount Moriah. And what does Avraham say to God? What does Avram, the man who argued with God about strangers in Sodom and Gomorrah, what does he say to God? Nothing. He says nothing. He just accepts God's command. When do we stand up and yell? And when do we sit back and watch? For those of you who are in the comfy section here in the middle, feel free to take out with me your Eitz Chaim Chumashim. I am on page 696. 696 in the Machzorim. And here we're in the midst of what's known as the Holiness Code. We're in the middle of the book of Leviticus, chapter 19. The chapter begins with, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. And it's not a pop quiz, so I'll read it for everyone who doesn't have a chumash. Lo tisneh, the Torah says, Lo tisna et achicha bilvavecha. You shall not hate your kinsfolk in your heart. Reprove your kinsman, which means if you see him doing something wrong, stand up and tell him. But incur no guilt because of him. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against your countrymen. Love your neighbor as yourself. I'm the Lord. The Torah and the subsequent halakha, the Jewish law of our rabbis, gives us wisdom as to how and when to stand up against that which we see as wrong. We're obligated to stand up and to speak out when we can make a difference. If we can make a difference ourselves and we can stop whatever that is wrong, that is unholy, if we ourselves can stand up and make a difference, we're obligated to do so. We have to open our mouths. We have to stop the hate. We have to stop the silliness. We have to stand up for that which is right and holy because it's our obligation to pursue God's kingdom here on earth. But our tradition says very clearly that if you speaking out will not make a difference, won't change the mind of the perpetrator, you're forbidden from speaking out. Even more so, if you speaking out, even against that which is wrong, if you speaking out will cause embarrassment to the other person, then you can't speak out. Now imagine how different our conversations would be. Imagine how different our Facebook posts would be if in pursuing that which is unholy and challenging it, we ceased from using words of derision. We ceased using insults. We ceased criticizing and trying to tear down and sought only to build up. Imagine how different we would be. That would be righteous indignation rather than unrighteous indignation. Yes, we're obligated to stand up against that which is wrong, but how we do it matters. lest we incur the guilt as well. And our halakha, our Jewish law, goes on to say you cannot reprove a kinsman. You cannot seek to correct somebody else unless you truly love them in your heart first. You have to do it from a place of love. Imagine how that would change our conversations and how we talk to each other. We're angry. We're angry, and often we're justified in our anger. But too often our righteous indignation crosses over into unrighteous indignation, and we become part of the problem rather than part of the solution. There's a Hasidic story about the Rebbe of Tzanz. When the Rebbe was a young man, he decided he wanted to go out and change the world. When he turned 30, he realized he couldn't do it. So he decided at 30 he was going to make a commitment and just change the province around him. When he turned 40, he realized he couldn't even do that. So at 40, he decided he was going to go out and just change the city in which he lived. And by 50, he realized he couldn't even do that. So at 50, what did the Rebbe of Tzanz do? He decided to change himself. At 50, the Rebbe of Tzanz decided to change himself. And you know what? That he was able to do. And once he changed himself, he began to change his friends and his family around him. And then his city too began to change. And then his province began to change. And then the world began to change as well. On Rosh Hashanah, it sure is a lot easier to stand up and point our fingers at the other guy and say what he or she is doing wrong. But at this time of year, we're called upon not to point our fingers at others, but to point our fingers at ourselves. And to ask today, right here, right now, what can I do better? What can I do differently? In my anger, how can I be righteous? In my indignation, how can I be moral and upright and appropriate? So as we are now in the midst of Rosh Hashanah, we are reminded that tefillah, teshuvah, and tzedakah, that prayer, repentance, and acts of charitable kindness can indeed avert a severe decree. And God knows this world and this country and our people are in need of averting the severe decree. And so it is on this Rosh Hashanah that we commit first and foremost to looking inward, to changing ourselves, and then changing the family and friends around us, not through meanness and not through anger and not through terrible Facebook posts, but through kindness, through love, through education, through a desire to seek that which is holy in this world. And if you feel a need to give your 2 cents to somebody, you can give it to God through prayer. If you feel your need to give your 2 cents to somebody, you can give it to yourself through tshuva. And indeed, even then, if you still feel the need to give your 2 cents, give it to someone who's in need. Give it to tzedakah. And in that way, we can truly make a difference in this world. On this Rosh Hashanah, may God bless us with the wisdom to know when to speak up and when to speak out and when to keep silent. On this Rosh Hashanah, may God give us the strength to guard our mouths, that we may utter words only of holiness. On this Rosh Hashanah, may we be empowered to stand up for that which is right and holy in this world, because God knows we need it. And on this Rosh Hashanah, may we recommit ourselves to a life of tefillah, of prayer, of teshuvah, of repentance, and truly of tzedakah. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may this be God's will. And let us say together, Amen.